We've been running in the series Worthwhile Life in Impossible Situations over the last few weeks, and it may have seemed like a long race to some of you, but bear with us, we're almost to the finish line. When you think about your life right now, or when you just think about your college career and graduation in 2 days, would you say that you were more of a pioneer, someone who was always pushing on no matter what the situation was, or were you more of a settler, someone who just settled for something less than what they really wanted? Okay, this may be I have a story for you guys. It may be like the silliest story ever, but it shows between a pioneer and a settler. A few weeks ago, I was really hungry, and I really wanted wheat bread and pirate booty chips, so I could eat them. So I could have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and relax and watch a movie. So this was on a Saturday night. And so I text people, because normally I would use someone's car, but with my arm being broken and I was now coming off my pain meds, I couldn't drive, and I would hope someone would have been like, yeah, take my car and go someplace. So I was like texting people, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I just got back from the store. I'm like, crap. And then next, I'm on duty. I'm doing all these things that would make it hard for me to get to the store. So on Monday, my friend comes to my room, and she's like, so did you ever find someone to take you to the store? I'm like, no, and I still want my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And my friend looked over, and she's like, you have bagels. Why don't you just make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich on the bagel? And I felt like she was insulting my intelligence, first of all. I was like, how dare you? Like, I want wheat bread. Like, I don't want bagels. If I wanted bagels, I would have ate it at the very beginning. So, she's like, all right. And so finally, on Thursday night, almost a week later, my RA was like, yeah, I'm going to Fred Meyer. Do you still want that stuff? And I was like, what? Still want it? I need it right now. Like, go to the store and get it. And she went. I like came back, and she came back, and I made her make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I sat there, I watched my movie, ate my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and my pirate booty chips, and I felt like I was in heaven. Like, no joke. I was so happy. And in some ways in our lives, we are always pushing forward to achieve some kind of goal. Last week, a couple weeks ago, I was determined to get that wheat bread. And I was not going to settle for just the bagels. I wanted to push on to receive what I really wanted, and that was the wheat bread and the pirate booty chips. Philippians 13, 12 through 16, Paul writes, I'm on the wrong thing, my bad. Not that I have already obtained all this, or have been already made perfect, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ has took hold of me. Brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenwards in Christ Jesus. All of us who are mature should take such view of things, and if on some point you think differently, that too God will make it clear to you. Only let us live up to what we have already obtained. When I read this, Paul said the word press on twice. And clearly you could tell that Paul was definitely a pioneer. He was someone that was going to push on no matter what the situation was and no matter what was in his way. 3:12b through 13a says, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ has taken hold of me. I have not considered myself to be taken hold of. When Paul writes this passage, he sees himself as a runner in a race to win the prize. And the prize for Paul was the perfect union with Christ, which was his finish line. He has not taken hold of that perfect union yet, but he pressed on to receive it. The big motive in Paul's life is to see Jesus face to face. Right now, as college students, our big motive in our lives is to make it to May 8th, and some of us to our senior year. Throughout the year, we pressed on so we could grab a hold of that prize, which is our degree. And we decided not to settle for anything less, such as our high school diploma. Our minds were made up of what we really wanted in life. Just as our minds were made up, Paul's mind was made up that whatever he did within his life was going to be centered around God's purpose for him. He was pressing on with such intense love for Christ so that he could grab a hold of his prize. His aim was to reach and fulfill the goal for which Christ has set for him. When it comes to any kind of goal in our lives, determination is necessary. We are faced with many distractions from our past, present, or even our future aspirations that will threaten to pull us away from God. Even if these struggles occur, we must never take our eye off the prize. Like, for example, if you're running a race and you're running the hurdles and you fall, you aren't just going to walk off and just be mad that you fell. You're like, oh, well, I don't want to finish the race because I fell and like everyone's like passing me. You're going to get up and you're going to finish it because you want to like let everyone know, yeah, even though I fell, I finished the race. Or who knows, you might come back in first place again and you might end up in fourth, but you still kept your eye on that prize and finishing the race. 13b says, but one thing I do know, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead. We all know from previous sermons that we've heard about Paul's life that Paul was faced with many, many different distractions. He forgot what was behind him. He forgot his old life of sin and strained towards what was ahead, his final salvation. What was behind Paul was a life of persecution against the Christians. But instead of dwelling on the past, he knew that Christ had freed him from that, and there was no need to hold on to that situation. His past was something that Christ was going to make something out of. That instead of dwelling on the past, he was going to use what Christ did behind to help people know Christ better. Even though Paul was in an impossible situation due to his incarceration, he was going to make it worthwhile. He saw that he could still seek that perfect union with Christ, and he was not just going to settle for preaching to his inmates, but he was going to fulfill the purpose that God had for his life. He was not going to feel sorry for himself because he was in jail, or because he felt like he needed to settle because he was in jail, because those walls were separating him from the people and him preaching to the people. But instead, through these letters that he wrote, he was going to let everyone know about Christ's love for them, and he was going to make something out of the situation that he was in. What was worthwhile in his impossible situation was that he was finding Jesus, and Jesus was finding him in jail. It does not matter what situation we're in, Jesus is always there, and he'll make whatever we're going through worth it in the end. Forgetting what is behind does not only mean to forget your bad experiences, but also your good ones. First, we must never dwell on our past difficulties, failures, because it opens up the door wider for Satan to come in and overwhelm us with guilt, anger, frustration, and many different emotions that threaten to pull us away from Christ. Christ has freed us from our situations, and we should no longer dwell on them. Second is that we must never rest in our past accomplishments and successes, things that would have us become spiritually prideful. When we rest or settle in our past, it closes the door to Christ. A couple of days ago, I was on Facebook, of course, and I saw this. I think it was a group, or it was one of those fan pages. Whatever, the title of it was, "Don't tell God how big your problem is, but tell your problem how big God is." And I thought it fit perfect for my sermon, because when I thought about it, I was like, when people settle on their problems, they forget how big God is and how God could take that problem and make something out of it. And when we rest in our problem, we miss some of the things that God's trying to do in our lives and through our lives to reach others. 3:5-16 says, all of us who are mature should take such view of things. And if at some point you think differently, that too God will make it clear to you. In the very beginning of this passage, Paul says, all of us who are mature. What does Paul even mean when he says all of us who are mature? Paul is saying that we should never allow inconsistencies to take over our lives. When we are a mature follower of Christ, we continue to grow in our relationship no matter what the situation is. We need to continue to live it to the things that we have already obtained and beyond. So how do we become spiritually mature? We become spiritually mature in two ways. By putting into practice the biblical knowledge and getting past our highest maturity level. First, we must put into practice the biblical knowledge that we already have and the truth that we have already comprehended.